I and many other people have been calling this for several years now, and it's finally starting to happen. And really, I take no joy in VW's imminent collapse. Plus, in slightly bizarre news, it looks like Tesla's V4 Superchargers might support credit cards. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. First of all, a little teaser for a future video that should be coming out in the next few days. I drove to Greenville, South Carolina today and met up with Brandon from Car Questions Answered, and he took his first ride in a Tesla with me in my Model Y. So he got to experience the acceleration, the joy of figuring out how to make everything work, the charging, and of course, full self-driving. So definitely stay tuned for that. We have a ton of footage to kind of sort through and make videos up, but there will be videos on each of our channels for that. Anyway, for today's video, let's first take a look at this really interesting article by Fred Lambert. And of course, I will put links to all this stuff in the description so you can check it out. Tesla unveils V4 supercharger with credit card reader subsidy measure. So of course, there are the old V2 superchargers that are 150 kilowatts max. There is what was state of the art until very recently, which is V3 superchargers, which are 250 kilowatts max. And then these guys, I think, top out at 400. Maybe it's even higher. I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, the V4 superchargers are very new. And if this article by Fred Lambert is correct, Tesla is actually putting in credit card readers, I'm sure much against their will, in order not to lose subsidies that they could be getting otherwise by installing superchargers. If you don't know, right now, superchargers are dead simple. The app on your phone has a credit card associated with it. All that stuff is connected, so the car knows as soon as you plug the supercharger cable in, the car communicates with the supercharger system back to the mothership. It says, yeah, this person has a valid credit card on file. All of that kind of stuff happens in the handshake in just a few seconds, and then it starts charging up almost immediately. But all that stuff is under the hood, and as far as you as the consumer is concerned, it's just like magic. It just starts to charge. And of course, your credit card magically gets charged as well. But as we'll see in this article, apparently Tesla was at risk of losing a whole bunch of subsidies, particularly in California, if they didn't install some sort of ability to read credit cards so that other people could utilize the service without having to have a Tesla app or some other app that integrated with Tesla superchargers. And of course, this is becoming a bigger and bigger deal as the NACS, which is the Tesla plug standard, is getting adopted by Ford and GM and Electrify America and others. More and more people with different EVs that are not Teslas are going to be wanting to charge at Tesla superchargers. And so I guess the idea is that they should just be able to show up with a credit card rather than having to have an app and all of that kind of stuff. Now, every other supercharger I've ever used that charges money, you also have to have an app for, so I'm not exactly sure why the idea of a credit card reader is necessary. But you know, government bureaucracy is what it is, so I'm sure Tesla has decided to at least put something in place so they can add this if possible. Because as you can see from this Tesla Owners UK exclusive picture that they've got here, this is not actually enabled at this point. It appears that there is the space now for a contactless type of thing where you can like do tap to pay or something, but it's not actually enabled at this point. And here, if we blow this up, you can see this would be the area where contactless payment, I guess, would be enabled. Now, that's not a definite, but that's what it appears to be from this picture. More on that in a minute, but first, do you have a perfect diet day in, day out? Yeah, me neither. Well, fortunately for all of us, Ritual helps people fill the gaps in their diets with no shady additives, fillers, or colorants. These easy-to-take capsules that have a nice mint flavor provide 10 nutrients to support a strong foundation for your health. Ritual is a great product with full transparency about its ingredients and sourcing, so I know I can take these vegan supplements with full confidence about where everything came from. Plus, it's just fun to look at the map on the Ritual webpage to find the source of each ingredient. Ritual is obsessively researched with vitamins to support everyone, including essentials for men, essentials for women, essentials for those of us over 50, for teens, and for pregnant women too. So whatever stage of life you're in, there's a supplement for you. The allergen-free, gluten-free pills have a great mint flavor so they're easy to swallow, and a time-release coating so that they are gentle on even an empty stomach. Plus, you can get the 10 high-quality nutrients your body needs delivered straight to your door every month. No strings attached, no extra charge. It's never too late to start a new Ritual and incorporate a healthy habit into your routine. With products for different life stages, Ritual makes it easy. Just use my code DrKnowItAll30 or click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to get 30% off your first month's supply now. Thanks again to Ritual for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get back to it. So, reading a few paragraphs from this article, Tesla has unveiled its V4 supercharger station, and it now includes a credit card reader for the first time, which might open doors for state subsidies. And then a little bit of history. As superchargers, of course, up until now were only for Tesla owners, the company handled all payments and activation of charging sessions through an automatic handshake between the cars and charging stations and through its mobile app. So as I was saying, it's all just sort of behind the scenes. You don't really notice as a consumer. There are literally 2 steps to supercharging. You back up, you plug in, there's no step 3. Everything is handled automatically. That's one of the reasons why it's so lovely. It's actually easier than getting a tank of gas, because you don't have to do the credit card thing. You don't have to do any of that stuff. It's just magic. It just takes care of all of that. So then we get to the present. Tesla is now opening up its supercharger network to non-Tesla electric vehicles. Its connector is becoming the standard in North America, or North American charging standard, and many markets are starting to require payment systems on charging stations. And again, FYI, I don't go to all of the other superchargers or fast chargers around, but most of the ones that I know of, in fact, all of them, I can't remember one where I could do tap to pay. I think all of them required downloading an app, which was kind of a pain in the butt and all of that. So I could see it would be nice to be able to do point of sale, where you just walk up and you're like, I just want to use this particular brand one time and just pay for it once without having to download an app and stuff. So I can see the rationale for this somewhat, but of course, if you're going to be primarily charging using Tesla's superchargers or something, it would make way more sense to just download the app, because it's going to be way smoother. But anyway, there is some rationale for putting in something like that. Perhaps not for Tesla superchargers, but for other ones, for other third-party ones. But of course, governments are not going to be that fine-grained in their rulings. They're just going to be like, everybody has to have this. So unfortunately for Tesla, that means more parts, more stuff that could break, more service, all of that kind of stuff. So there are a lot of hurdles that you have to do to be able to install this. But in that case, you get a bunch of subsidies, so it probably all comes out in the wash. So here we get, in California, Tesla was in the running for $6 million in funding for 4 large supercharger stations with 420 charge points. That is nice. The California Energy Commission's Clean Transportation Program, Rural Electric Vehicle Charging Program, was behind the funding. Now we learn that Tesla has given up on the $6 million in subsidies because it doesn't want to comply with the, quote, payment infrastructure requirements, which basically is a credit card enabled station. However, things might be about to change. The automaker brought its latest supercharger V4 charging station to the Goodwood Festival of Speed in the UK, and some keen observers saw something interesting underneath the connector. And of course, as we saw, it features what appears to be a card reader, and there's an empty space over it that looks to be ready to receive a screen. So it seems to me the likelihood is that Tesla's going to build in that facade on the front of these superchargers, but they will only install the card reader and the screen in places where they are required to by law in order to get subsidies or to be able to install these. So my guess is, if you live in a state or a country where this is not required, you will probably see the V4 supercharger, but you'll just see that little blank slot there. It'll just be a blank, and there won't be the credit card reader or the screen, because Tesla probably doesn't want to add all of that stuff, and it's a giant headache for them behind the scenes, because they also have to deal with all the credit card transactions and all of that other stuff. Way easier not to have to do that. So I'm sure they will only actually install this in areas where they're required to in order to get the subsidies. But if you live in one of those lucky places, you will be able to see this in the future. And on the charging front, I'm going to throw in a little addendum, which will actually tail into probably another video I will be doing soon about the electric grid and everything. But I think it would behoove Tesla and Electrify America and others. And also, this is something where I actually think local and federal governments might get involved in this. But I think they need to post a big sign like a gas station where it actually shows how much money per kilowatt hour is being charged currently for electricity, because that changes radically over time. And so honestly, I wouldn't even mind seeing like a little graph that showed the next maybe 8 or 12 hours and where you are on that graph. And the reason for this is not because I love regulation and a bunch of extra stuff, but I think that we can tie psychology into balancing out the grid. So one of the problems with the grid is, of course, that it can get overloaded. If it's a hot day, everybody's running their air conditioners, and everybody suddenly wants to go supercharge at a supercharger. Well, they raise the prices, but the problem is nobody knows that that's been raised. So maybe it's 50 cents a kilowatt hour right now, and if you waited 5 hours, it would drop down to something like 20 cents a kilowatt hour. So if they post that, people people will probably, if they are able to, right, if they have the choice, they'll go like, oh, I don't want to go right now. I'm going to wait until like 8 o'clock at night and I'll come back and do it then when it's a whole bunch cheaper to fill up. And then, of course, anybody who's like, I'm on a road trip, I got to do it right now, I've got to charge, whatever, they'll pay the extra for that. But for anybody who's not urgently needing to supercharge at that moment, that would psychologically push them away. They're going to be price sensitive. They're going to say like, I'll wait until a different time and I will go back when it's cheaper. And that's why I think not just having a price, but actually having some sort of graph that shows what the price is going to look like over the next, I think maybe half day, right? 12 hours, something along those lines, so that people who have the ability to make the choice will make that choice. And that is going to help balance out demand, because people, if they see it up there, and yeah, if you look on the Tesla app, you can click on it and you can go into it and you can see what the price is. But at that point, in a way, you've already committed to it because you're probably already there or something. So I'm just saying, like, as you drive by, if it's a local supercharger that you use quite often, and of course that would be the case where you would actually have the flexibility to charge at different times. But as you drive by every day, you'll see when it's more expensive, when it's less expensive, what it's projected to be over time. And so you can sort of schedule that in if you do need to do supercharging, if you're not charging at your house, if you need to do supercharging on a more local level where you're a little more flexible about how you do it. Anyway, I just think it would be a good idea for these prices to be, put up on a big sign so that people can see that kind of thing. Plus the fact, when I was talking to Brandon today, he said he'd never actually been to a supercharging station. And I said, I'm sure you drive by them all the time. You just don't notice because they're kind of tucked behind things. So putting a sign up that says EV charging this much money is also kind of a way of advertising it for people who might be driving a different type of EV and don't have particularly good software to direct them to fast chargers or something. So anyway, I think it would be helpful as an advertising sort of thing, but I also think it would be very, very helpful to push people to want to charge at times that are cheaper and therefore balance out the amount of people who are trying to charge at a specific time. Anyway, that's my thoughts. You might totally disagree with me, but let me know what you think about that in the comments. Okay, and now on to the sad sort of I told you so type of news, but this is not something I take any pleasure in because there are a lot of people's livelihoods being affected by this VW debacle that's going on. And you're seeing the same thing happen with Toyota and with other manufacturers in Japan. In fact, I just heard Mitsubishi Japan declared bankruptcy in China. So we're starting to see some dominoes fall. That's a relatively small one. VW Toyota, on the other hand, are about as big as the dominoes get. Anyway, in this article dated July 14th, Peter Johnson, Volkswagen CEO issues final wake-up call amid drastic spending freeze. Warning of tough times ahead, CEO of Volkswagen passenger cars, Thomas Schäfer, and I hope I pronounced that close to correct, addressed top VW employees this week, telling them this is the final wake-up call. Schäfer is calling for a short-term spending freeze to get costs under control. We are letting the costs run too high in many years, or for many years, I don't know, over many years, something like that. VW's leader proclaimed during an online management meeting this week. Schäfer said he plans to cut spending for the rest of the year as part of a broader company-wide savings plan. Last month, VW announced a new Accelerate Forward program designed to drive long-term profitability and performance. Part of the plans include doubling VW passenger brand profit margins from around 3% currently to 6.5%. Skipping a little ahead, the company will focus on higher volume models to streamline production while reducing the number of variants. Where have I heard that before? With Tesla, right? To further optimize efficiency, VW gave an example of its new ID.7 having 99% fewer configuration options compared to a Golf 7 model. So that's all to the good, honestly. That's a very, very good thing. Meanwhile, Volkswagen's problems go beyond just simply profit margins. Despite all electric vehicle sales increasing 48% year over year to 328,600, which is respectable, in the first half of the year, EV sales fell in one of its most critical markets, China. And just to take a moment on China, China is an incredibly competitive EV market. Of course, there's been an economic downturn, which even puts more competition on. And Volkswagens, quite frankly, are rather boring cars. They don't have a lot of great technology inside. And Chinese consumers in particular really like high-end, high-tech technology inside their cars. In other words, they want that sort of computer on wheels sort of effect, and Volkswagen is just unable to deliver that. They were supposed to have the CARIAD software by the end of this year, but I don't even know that they're doing that anymore. It seems like they've actually sort of dropped that program, and they might actually license software from somebody else, and they might even end up manufacturing somewhere else as well and just putting their own badges on other people's manufactured vehicles. So anyway, this is a pretty big debacle for Volkswagen, but they have set themselves up for this unfortunate disaster. And then, of course, we get to the really, really dire quote. According to quotes by Manager Magazine, VW's Schäfer said at the management meeting this week, the roof structure is on fire. This is the final wake-up call. VW's final wake-up call comes as the automaker's dominance over the Chinese auto market is slipping. The Volkswagen Group generates around 40% of its revenue from China, ouch, yet EV sales are down 1.5% from the first half of 2022. More importantly, while new EV registrations are still climbing in other key markets, many of these are older orders from last year or even 2021 in some instances. According to Handelsblatt, the reason for VW's demand problem is its so-called agency model the automaker implemented with dealers while introducing its ID series. The move essentially helps save on sales costs, but limits the dealer's ability to raise or lower prices, which is actually rather critical. A VW sales rep said, the manufacturer cannot sell directly. That becomes clear in times like these, adding the electric models are simply too expensive. The report claims VW's high order backlog is still masking the low demand. Earlier this year, CEO of VW Group and Porsche said he had no plans of joining Tesla in a price war. My prediction is that that quote is going to age badly, and you're going to see Volkswagen start to lower prices pretty drastically in the second half of the year. In fact, if we look at the next paragraph, you can see it already has. However, unlike Tesla, VW is not generating substantial margins on its electric models. Despite this, the automaker has already caved in China by introducing a limited time offer on its ID.3 electric car, and I believe they actually extended that twice now, or at least once. So anyway, it's basically a price cut, even though it's just an offer. Looking ahead, VW will likely look to introduce cheaper, more basic models with smaller batteries, like the ID.2 All Concept starting under $27,000 with up to 279 miles of range. So unfortunately for Volkswagen, and this is also happening with Toyota as well, I'll leave that for another day. But anyway, what they're doing is they are competing in a bunch of market segments like mid to, kind of lower end luxury vehicles. And they're competing against a whole bunch of Chinese manufacturers at the low end of the spectrum, all the way up to the high end actually. And they're competing with Tesla at the more high end of the spectrum. And they're basically getting crushed by all of them, especially in China, but even in places like Europe and the United States where VW has traditionally done very well, their EV sales are doing rather poorly in 2023. And here's the problem. They're looking to introduce the ID.2 at around $27,000. That just so happens to be the price range where Tesla is looking to come in with their Model 2 or whatever the thing is going to be called. But anyway, the new models that are going to be made in Mexico, and it looks like Shanghai as well. But these new lower cost Teslas are going to be competing directly against the cheaper Volkswagens, and more than likely Tesla is going to get the car to market first. I can't guarantee that, but I have a feeling that will happen, which means that VW is going to come late to the party with a car that doesn't have nearly as good a software as Chinese manufacturers or Tesla, and it just seems like it's unlikely that there's going to be a huge demand for that vehicle. Now, $27,000 with the US tax credit, sure, I mean, that puts it under $20,000 to purchase, but if you could get an ID.2, which has bad software, I mean, it's just notoriously bad. VW electric vehicles have notoriously bad software. If you're going to do that, or for the same price, or maybe even $1,000 or $2,000 less, you can buy a Tesla Model 2. I mean, what is the choice going to be? Most people are going to opt for the Tesla. It's going to be a better experience. So as Schäfer said, the roof is on fire. The problem is that it's mostly burned and it's probably going to collapse on VW soon. And that is a tragedy for all the people who are working for them. Again, I don't take a lot of glee in this. It's just one of those things that unfortunately has been really obvious for several years, and it's the chickens are coming to roost. Is that the metaphor? I don't know. Anyway, this is a bunch of bad decisions that have been made by VW and Toyota and others. And all of a sudden, you're seeing all of these chickens starting to come home to roost, and things are changing rapidly. And they're all suddenly going like, oh crap, we're in a panic. Well, they should have been in a panic 5 or 6 years ago, seeing this coming. Will these companies survive? I would say yes, except for the fact that they have mountains of debt on top of all this stuff. So there is a reasonable likelihood that these companies could go bankrupt. Their governments are going to have to bail them out. That is going to be a huge stress on the German economy, the Japanese economy, probably the US economy as well, because at least Stellantis and possibly GM as well, and maybe Ford. But, they could have a lot of these companies going bankrupt at the same time, and the federal governments are going to feel like they're too big to fail, going to try to prop them up rather than letting the market dictate what it needs to dictate. And that's going to be a huge drain on all of these economies at the time when everybody should be really focused on Chinese manufacturers and competing with them. So for legacy auto and for countries that house legacy auto manufacturers, it's going to be a rough few years. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking, especially the more positive news about the V4 Superchargers. The VW thing is not the most pleasant news in the world, but it is important to get that out to everybody so that you can see it coming. Anyway, if you did enjoy the video, please do like it so other people can find it, and of course consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon patrons, my YouTube channel members, and of course my Twitter subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can, and of course if you want to join the team, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, thank you once again to Ritual for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to check out the link in the description and get 30% off your first month. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.